What I wanted to talk about today is, it was titled Awakening to Love, which is probably a confusing title. I had somebody actually ask me, are you talking about love and romance? I'm like, well, yes and no, sort of, because I do talk about that because, I'm a marriage therapist. But what I've come to discover is that this is something that applies to every aspect of your life. Your friends, the people you work with, your children, every aspect of your life can be impacted by this. I've had clients come in after reading my book and they just start like jumping up and down on my couch going, I gotta tell everybody I know about this. Because it makes such a big difference when you understand these concepts. And, whether you buy my book or not, you'll get, I think, the core of this idea through what I'm about to tell you. And how I came to all this, and it was so funny that Lisa asked me to talk this month on the subject of love, because the very first time I ever spoke, I was 13 years old, and I was a very shy 13-year-old, but I had read the Bible for the first time, and the New Testament, and what I took from it after reading it, and I just boiled it down to its essence, and was like, God is love. And went, okay, I get that. Because what happened was I wasn't raised in any kind of religious environment, and I was just curious about what this whole God thing was. And I went to church on my own at 13, which, by the way, I have to share with you that when we first met, Lisa and the people that she invited in, every one of us had in common that we had found God on our own at 13.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, that's a sign. This is going to happen. And so at 13, I went to my Sunday school class because we were each kind of taking turns doing a lesson in our class. And I brought in all these poems that I had written about love, and verses from the Bible about love, and music about love, and we're talking 1969, so there were candles and incense, in the room, and the kids were going, huh? But it's okay. I took away from that this is what I'm here for, is to teach people how to open their hearts to love in some way. And what I know is that for me, the reason that that's such a calling for me is that I grew up in an environment where I wasn't loved. Maybe I was, I just didn't feel it. I didn't get to experience that for myself. I had a lot of abuse, neglect. I had so much love. I just remember how much love I had for my mom, who was angry and neglectful. I had so much love for my brother, who was ornery as heck. I had so much love for my uncle, who was abusive. But I had all this love for them, but I didn't understand why it wasn't coming back to me. And it took me many, many, many years to figure out that wasn't about me. That was about the fact that because of the experiences that we have in our life, we shut ourselves off to love. We shut ourselves off to experience it from other people, and we shut ourselves off from our ability to express it to other people. And I also have learned a lot in working with clients about how it is that exactly happens. So let's start off with talking about what is love anyway. What is that? Do you have any ideas? What is love? Love is an emotion. What else is it? Somebody said action. What? Patient. Kind.
Acceptance and appreciation for another.
That's good. I can't spell. You're going to spell it for me.
I think it's anything. Yeah.
I'm also dyslexic. Okay. You got it. You got it?
That's perfect.
Close enough.
What else? Connection.
You just put 1 Corinthians 13.
Right. Okay. So all that's true. How many of us experience this every day of our lives? A couple of us? Good. But most of us don't get to feel that every single day. And there's different kinds of love, aren't there? What are the different kinds of love?
Physical.
Romantic.
Yeah.
Brotherly.
Brotherly.
Tough love.
Tough.
Unconditional.
Unconditional. Now that's a rarity. Okay. What else? Agape. How about parental? What else?
Friendship.
Friendship. Right, okay, there we go. So those are all, I mean, we have all these different capacities for experiencing and expressing love. So what is it that blocks love?
Selfishness.
Selfishness,
Resentment.
fear, pride. And we'll talk about that later. What? Bitterness. Jealousy. How about wounding? Jealousy. What else?
Anger.
Anger. What's that? Pain, broken, is that what it is? Pain.
Resentment.
Resentment, that's a good one. So then we have all these things that block us from feeling. There's probably a lot more. So what I've learned is that we have this thing called a three-part brain. Anybody familiar with the three-part brain? Oh, good. Okay, this is your brain. This is the model of your brain. Your brain has three parts. It has this brain stem, which is where that survival reflex lives, that fight, flight, freeze instinct that we all hear so much about. It's called the reptilian brain or the lizard brain. You might have heard reference to. That's the brain stem. It's a part of our brain that forms first in utero. Then we have our mammalian brain, which is where our emotion centers are. It's why we love animals so much. They're just pure emotion. So then we have our new brain, which is where our rational, logical thought is, where our identity is, our language skills, our ability to solve problems, and all that is up there in that rational new brain. Well, what happens when we experience any of these things is we go automatically into this old brain. We go into that survival reflex, and we're flooded with emotions. Our new brain shuts down, and we say, do, and behave in ways that are not rational, that are not logical, that are not loving, that are not that block our ability to experience love. So that old brain is what happens to us. Now, a lot of people call that the ego, and we need to suppress the ego, but the truth is we need that, okay? We need that survival skill. We need it. God gave it to us for a reason. We have that ability to survive for a reason, and we need that. We need that survival instinct. So it's not a bad thing, it's just something we need to understand about how we all work. It's every one of us. There's not any of us that don't deal with this on a daily basis. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's suddenly you get a phone call that somebody's collecting something for a bill you didn't know about, and our new brain goes offline, our old brain is online. I mean, just any kind of iota of a possible could be maybe a threat, and that old brain goes into gear, and we are not functioning at our highest level. Having that awareness that happens to us, having that awareness that it happens to every single person that we interact with, can start to shift how you experience your life and your relationships with other people. What I also have learned, and I will draw a little picture of this, is something that happened. I I was actually talking to a client one time in my office, and I was trying to, because he was like so stuck in this victim place, and I was like, oh, how am I going to get you out of it? So I suddenly came up with this to draw this on the board for him. Okay. Victim position. The old brain really only knows that you are under attack, that you are in danger or in some way potentially in danger. And the old brain's job is, what did I say the job was? Survival. That's right. So it's only focused on your own survival. So is it at all interested in anybody else at that moment? No. So it's completely egocentric. It's focused on, it feels, at that moment you feel overwhelmed, terrified, despairing. So the victim place is this place that's so horrible that if you stay there, and there are some people who do choose to stay there, by the way, because that is a survival reflex. It's like, I'm going to fall down and hope somebody comes to rescue me. It's not a very successful one. It's like this position where you're not going to likely survive to stay there, but some people do. But usually our brain takes us to someplace else. It takes us into one of two other alternatives. It's very simplistic. That old brain is very primitive, right? It really only knows two alternatives. And the alternatives to feeling like a victim are to go into either rescue mode or self-protection. So what do you think rescue mode looks like?
Help me.
Do what?
Help me.
Help me. Well, rescue mode is helping other people, right? Help me as victim.
Oh, sorry.
but that was The rescue mode
I'll save you.
is about trying to get power and control over feeling like a victim by fixing the situation.
Right.
By solving all the problems, by pleasing, placating, making everybody else happy. Self-protection, what do you think that looks like?
You build a wall.
Building a wall is one of the ways. There's two ways to self-protect. One is that building a wall, and the other is to lash out, try to get power and control by either using more words, louder words, or physical power and control over the situation. Where you see people moving into physically aggressive states. That's the self-protection mode. But it all comes out of being in this victim mode to begin with. So they start out feeling one of these things, right? And end up behaving in one of these ways. Now, both of these positions, one of the things that was very astounding to me when I figured this out is that both of these positions are about control. They are an attempt to get power and control over feeling like a victim, because that's the powerless position. All right? And at the core of all this is nothing but pain. There's no way out of this. It's miserable. But yet that's what we do automatically and instinctively whenever any of those things happen, whenever we feel threatened in any way. So that all sounds pretty horrible, doesn't it? But we all do it. And we all do it instinctively. How many of us have ever had a suicidal thought pop through our head? Yeah. I've done it. Doesn't mean I'm suicidal, but I have had that thought pop through my head. And that's because it's when I'm in the victim place. That's when that happens. So then, but our old brain goes, okay, well, then I'm going to go into rescue. I'm going to try to please and placate or make everybody else happy. Well, this doesn't work either, because what ends up happening is you're shutting down all of your needs, all of your wants, and you're just suffocating yourself in trying to take care of everybody else. And over time, you start to feel resentful. Believe me, I've seen this with my couples over and over and over again, where these couples come in and one of the partners, or maybe even both of them, have been in this rescue mode their whole entire relationship, and so they don't even know who each other are anymore because they've been so busy trying to please and placate that they're not even telling the truth about who they are anymore. And by 5-10 years later, they don't know who the other person is because they're so busy trying to please they stopped telling their truth. Or, like this other couple I just recently worked with, who both of them were in self-protect mode. They were physically abusive to each other. It was bad. Well, I had a solution. And it's so simple that it's mind-blowing. Because if once you get it, it just takes all that away, and you can choose to do something entirely different, experience every relationship in your life differently. And that, by the way, this by the way, which I spoke of that before, but I call this the cycle of egocentrism because it happens in a cycle. You know, they just kind of go back and forth, so it's the cycle of egocentrism. So the opposite of that, and what's really great is my clients gave me this. I was sitting and I described this to one of my clients, and he said, well, so what's the opposite of that? I was like, That's what got my thinking started and started this whole thing happening. So thank you, Doug. The opposite of being a victim is ownership. Anybody know what ownership means? What does it mean?
Taking responsibility.
Taking responsibility is part of it, yeah. Is owning what? Let me say something. What else is it?
Ownership for your actions.
Ownership for your actions.
Your emotions.
Your emotions, absolutely. And you cannot own what doesn't belong to you. Let's say that again. You cannot own what doesn't belong to you. In other words, if somebody else is upset, you didn't make that happen. That's not your job to make them not be upset. That's their job. Your job is to manage your own feelings the best you can. Not control them, because you can't do that. But you can learn to manage them. So ownership is about owning responsibility for your own actions, your own boundaries. In other words, not taking in what doesn't belong to you. What?
It just comes to mind, there was a counselor that I was enjoying, but he always has said in one of his lectures, he goes, yeah, for the first 2 years of his marriage, he thought his wife was responsible for his happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of us do that. We get married thinking we're going to live happily ever after because this person is going to take care of us and make us happy the rest of our lives, as though that were their job. It is not their job to make us happy. It is our job to make us happy. That's part of ownership. We own responsibility for our own lives, our own happiness, our own emotions, our own actions, and our own feelings and our own value. Because we cannot express love unless we are able to understand and come from a place of self-love, which is why it was so difficult for me, coming from that background where I hadn't felt loved, to feel like I had anything to give, that anybody had, there was any potential for anybody to love me, because I didn't know that I had value. And it took a while for me to fully, like years, decades, for me to get there. Okay, so the opposite of rescuing is respect. Because when you respect someone, you don't try to please and placate them. You tell them the truth about what you feel and what you need. You love yourself and the other person. You respect yourself and the other person enough to speak your truth without any intent to harm nor protect them. The opposite of self-protection is empathy. You know what that does when you go from fear into empathy? It changes everything. This is what my couple who was so violent, I finally got them to have empathy for each other, and the violence stopped. They started listening to each other and getting that this is something more here than just a battle for survival. So I call this the cycle of compassion, because it allows you to move into love. And I'm not going to pretend that's easy, by the way. It is not easy. It's difficult to do because our old brain fights us every step of the way. Our old brain thinks that our survival is dependent on us staying in the old mode. And so we have to learn some really important things to be able to do that differently. And to do that differently, we have to learn how to soothe ourselves. We have to learn how to calm ourselves down. That minute you feel that flush of panic or need to attack or felt, and by the way, blame is what starts that whole egocentric cycle into gear. You think it's somebody else's fault. That's the opposite of taking ownership. So when you feel like it's somebody else is doing something to you, check it out. They're not. You are responsible for what's happening inside of you. So you start by breathing. Take a deep breath. Take a time out. Step away. Come back later. I'll tell you the story. My husband and I were working on this project together, and we had this investor that was going to call us, and it was a business thing that he had been talking to the guy about, and I was like, well, you know, I've asked him a couple times during the day, have you talked to this guy? And at the end of the day, he comes in. I said, well, did you talk to him? And he said, my gosh, he's like, what are you talking about? I told you I was going to call him. I'm like, okay. And it took me a minute, you know. I first of all, I have to say, immediately lashed back, yelled back, what the heck, I didn't do anything right. And then I backed off and went, wait a second, this is so out of character that I know something's going on here. A week or so later, we talked about it, and I find out, well, he has anxiety talking to people on the phone. I never knew this about him. I've been married to him for almost 20 years, and I didn't know this about him. So you just have to step back and find out what's going on. Have some empathy. If somebody's reacting in that way, instead of reacting defensively, be open and curious about what the heck just happened. Find out what's going on with them. I had this. With your kids, it's so important. I had this one client who, his son was just like, came to him one day and was just being horrible, kicking and spitting. I'm talking a 13-year-old kid, right? And my client was like, what the heck is going on? And a lot of times, parents will go into battle with their children when they behave badly. And it's understandable. Not saying if you've done that you're wrong, because it's instinctive to do that. But it's just not very productive. So what I had him do instead was just to be with him, let him have his meltdown, just to sit with him and be silent with him until he calmed himself down and said to him, what's going on? Well, it turned out he was missing his mom, who had just died about a year before, and he was feeling anxious and upset because his dad had started dating again. So if you take the time to really understand what's going on underneath, it can change your whole perspective on yourself and everybody else. And it's miraculous what happens. I have seen couples who have come in on the verge of divorce. This is why I'm kind of too good at what I do, because people come in and once they get this, they come in and maybe the first or second session, they're pretty much done. And I'm just kind of like going, okay, well, how can we apply this to other people in your life? Because really, once you get this, every relationship in your life is going to be different. And for me personally, I have to say I was divorced twice now. The first marriage, I married somebody because I didn't value myself. I didn't really, I went into it thinking, well, nobody else is going to love me. What an attitude. And then the second time I got married, I was doing a little bit better, but I went into it like you were saying, expecting him to make me happy, only to find out that he was only interested in making himself happy. And didn't know how to speak my truth. I was an absolute rescuer. And so that destroyed that relationship. And then it took about 6 years figuring out who I was and figuring out my value and rediscovering the truth that I'm pretty cool. like the rest of you, we all have so much to offer. And it's only by owning our own value that we can take that love into another relationship and have that to share and understand that this is part of respect. You have to respect yourself. You have to have that power of respecting yourself to have a solid relationship. Because you have to be able to fight for your point of view. And that means your relationships aren't always going to be clean. They're going to get messy, but they don't have to get ugly. Because you can have discussions that are heated and respectful and loving, but you got to be willing to speak your truth and walk in and risk. And one of the things I say to my clients is you have to risk the relationship to have a relationship. And that's something that I didn't realize. Fortunately, this whole thing I discovered before I got married this last time. About 6 months before I discovered this. And I was teaching it to him as we first got married, and we were practicing it together, and that's why the book ended up getting written, because he's like, you gotta write a book. You gotta write a book. This is too important. You have to write this book. So, okay. So a couple of years later, I wrote the book. I wrote the workbook, wrote another workbook, wrote another book. So they're out there, and it is a way to shift everything in your life. So I would like to go ahead and open it up to questions. Thoughts, ideas, yes.
In your sessions, do you ever pull in Campbell's book of the 5 love languages of
Often, yeah.
communication?
Yeah.
And also his book on the language of apology, which I find so many people are completely unaware. And whenever I saw it in the bookstore, I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. And it makes complete sense because it's exactly what needs to go with the 5 love languages.
And it's really about ownership, right?
Yeah, because it's a matter of being able to, when you hurt that person you love, to be able to apologize to them in a manner of where they accept it and they acknowledge
what I teach
regret.
people is how to own your behavior without owning responsibility for the outcome. You don't have to own responsibility for how the other person took it, but you do have to own responsibility for the fact that you did something that triggered this reaction. Something you did triggered that reaction. You may not know what it was, you may not have intended the outcome, but something you did created that outcome. So I teach people to say, I can see that something I did, that when I did this, it had this impact on you, and I'm really sorry that it had that impact. Can you tell me more about that?
Oh, that's all part of having communication.
Yeah, but people don't do that.
No, they don't.
They get defensive. They go into that self-protect mode, and but I didn't do anything wrong. What's the matter with you? It's like, but that doesn't work. If you want connection, if you really want to awaken your heart to love to everybody in your life, when you have an impact on somebody that you didn't intend, you say, wow, I didn't intend for that to upset you. Can you tell me more about what's happening? More questions? Thoughts?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I've had problems with relationships. I lost my son very tragically 10 years ago, 12 years old. And he was all the respect, empathy, and ownership.
So sorry.
And relationships have been hard. And I have a lot of that, and I went through a lot of counseling. But people say sometimes you live in the past because I talk about him as in a positive way. Because he's always going to be a part of my life.
Sure. I lost a son also, so I understand.
And
that.
so people say, well, you live in the past. It's not necessarily I'm living in the past. I'm still remembering him as a part of my family.
Who you are.
Right. So it's really hard to get into relationships because they don't understand or they feel they back
Losing a child is something that most people are so horrified by that it's really hard for them. They don't know how to respond. They respond very badly for the most part because it's their worst nightmare.
Right. I know that.
So they don't even want to think about that.
Right.
I lost my son through sudden infant death, and we'd go to health fairs and have the booths for sudden infant death, and you could see people, they would like walk around the booth, because they don't want to think about that. So what I would encourage you to do is try to be empathetic. That it comes out of their fear.
Right.
It comes out of their, that just hits on a nerve that is so old and so uncomfortable for people. So just try to be empathetic and still speak your truth.
I do.